Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now we're going to briefly look at some of the arguments that we use for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a lowly, insignificant creation, it sometimes seems weird that we, the creation, are trying to give proofs for the existence of the one who not only created us and the proofs that we use for his existence. But because some people have not been blessed in the same way that we have, in the upbringing that we have, it's important that we present these proofs in as rational a way as possible so that everyone can understand what we say we've been blessed to understand. So one of the ways that we can introduce the topic of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the understanding of cause and effect. We say that the universe operates according to a very intricate and detailed and massive system of cause and effect. And in this system of cause and effect, nothing happens spontaneously, nothing happens randomly, nothing happens in isolation. Everything that happens is as a result of the causes that preceded it to produce that one effect. And when we're talking about this, it's important to also mention that in this universe there is no such thing as randomness. Nothing ever happens by random. So in your science classes, you've probably come across the word entropy. Entropy is defined as the tendency of a system to move towards disorder. And we say it's very important to look at the terms and definitions that we use because these determine how we look at the world. So if we are being taught in an academic setting in the classroom where the textbook and the professor who have a psychological advantage over the students is teaching them that the universe is moving towards disorder, what is this telling us? It's either subconsciously or consciously telling us that there is no design in the universe. What is the opposite of order and design? Is disorder and lack of design. So if the universe is tending towards disorder, either there was no design to begin with, or that design is not such a good one and that design is breaking down. But what we say is that there is no such thing as randomness, and those systems are not moving towards disorder because those systems are moving in the exact way that is dictated by the natural laws of that design. So every single particle of that system is meticulously, perfectly following the natural laws. Even when a building crumbles into dust, every single atom moved in a perfect way according to those natural laws. It moved according to that design. So it's not moving towards disorder, it's just perfectly following those natural laws. So every event, or every what we call an effect, was brought about by a number of causes. And those effects in turn become causes when they produce another effect themselves. So consider a row of dominoes. This is a very easy way to look at the system of cause and effect. You have a long row of dominoes. One domino, which we can call the cause, it falls down. It strikes a second domino, which is the effect. And that second one then falls down. Then that second one, as it falls, it strikes a third domino. So now that second domino, which was an effect, becomes a cause to topple down the third domino. And then this chain continues and continues until to affect all of the dominoes along the line. And now we can consider the universe as a complex system of dominoes falling and colliding in every direction possible. Now since this is falling in a very systematic way, we can look forward to see how all of these causes will progress, and we can look backwards at the causes that led up to our current state. But in this system of cause and effect, in this system of dominoes, when we're going into the past, we cannot infinitely regress to the past. This can't go on forever in the past because it would mean that there is nothing to move it in the beginning. So for example, if we look at each domino as coming into existence. As it falls, we equate that with coming into existence. So the first domino, or not the first domino, a domino exists, it falls down, and knocks the second one down. So that existence brought something else into existence. So this is going forward. Now let's go backwards. This domino did not exist. It existed and it did not exist before. How did it come into existence? The domino before it. Well, that domino at some time did not exist. So how did that one come into existence? The one before it. So these dominoes, none of them have the power to bring something into existence. They were all brought into existence by something else. So none of them have creative power. None of them have the power to bring something into existence because they were brought into existence themselves. So if this goes infinitely into the past, it means that there is nothing with creative power, there is nothing to bring things into existence, and there is nothing that actually exists. So something other than the dominoes must be the one to drop that first piece, because the dominoes don't drop themselves. Every single one of them is dropped by something else. So there is a progression to cause and effect, whereby only a cause can bring about an effect. They do not cause themselves. An effect that doesn't exist is incapable of producing another effect because it has not become reality yet. So therefore, an effect cannot be its own cause. The domino cannot create itself. The system of dominoes cannot create itself. The universe cannot create itself. So an initial, a prime, a first cause becomes a logical necessity. None of the dominoes drop themselves, so there must be something to drop that first domino. So the system of cause and effect does not initiate itself, so the first cause that starts it must be independent of the system itself. So when we're talking about the universe, the thing, the being, or whatever it is that causes the existence or the creation of the universe must be outside of the universe. If it was part of the universe, it would also be uncreated and unable to create, and created and caused like all of the other things. It would not be a creator itself. It would not be a bringer of existence in itself. So the system of cause and effect is one of the things that leads us to an understanding that there must be something outside of the system that initiates and starts it. Next, we say that the universe, in this beautiful, intricate system that it has, it does not deviate. It does not move away from the course that is set forth in these natural laws. Science would not be possible if the universe did not operate according to these standards. What does science do? It just finds all of these standards. It doesn't create them, but it finds them. And science is based on the belief that natural laws will operate in the future as they have in the past. If we change just one variable in science, we change just one equation, the whole system is going to fall apart. And it is these standards that allow us to uncover truths about the world through investigation. For example, we can predict the weather, we can predict other things, we can predict the motion of the heavens and the earth. And who knows, sometime in the future, with the tip of a finger, push of a button, we can move stars. Who knows if we can one day reach that power? It might even be possible. So this allows us to predict future natural events and do all of these great things. So every change or movement, whether it's a sun or an atom, is calculated and carried out with exact precision. So every aspect of the universe follows these natural laws as if by absolute compulsion, as if something is forcing it to move in this way. So we say that the design of the universe, this beautiful, intricate system, this indicates the knowledge of the designer. And the perfect operation of the universe demonstrates the designer's power. The design itself shows that there's knowledge and intelligence, and that the entire universe is being moved according to this design perfectly, meticulously, perpetually. It shows that there's a powerful being that is moving it. So therefore, there is an intelligent, powerful being that brought the universe into existence and maintains it, and we call this creator by the name God in English, and Allah in Arabic and Islam. Next, we say that the universe cannot create itself. We say that at some time, the universe did not exist, and now it does exist. Therefore, the universe is dependent on something else to bring it into existence. So something that is dependent, like the universe, its origin is not within itself because it cannot bring itself into existence. it's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense to say that the universe brought itself into existence before it existed. Well, before it existed, what was there? How can something bring something into existence if it doesn't exist in the first place? Therefore, the universe was brought into existence by something that already existed, and we call that being by the name God. Next, we say that belief in God is the greatest scientific truth, according to the definition of science that we explained earlier, that science means collecting data and then making a rational, reasonable judgment. Based on that data, based on this definition, belief in God is the greatest scientific truth. Now, of course, there are some people who say that there's no scientific empirical evidence for God's existence, that God can't be measured empirically, because God isn't something physical to be measured. So we agree. God is not something physical that we can measure or weigh. So physical qualities like size and weight and temperature, density, volume, none of these apply to God. But there is empirical evidence for his existence. Not his essence, but for his existence. Every particle of the universe is a sign for God's power and knowledge. So the existence of God is supported by more empirical evidence than any other idea known to humanity. As we understood previously, science consists of these philosophical conclusions based on that empirical data, and therefore the existence of God is the greatest of scientific truths. Next, we have the example of belief in God from natural belief. We say that the essence of every human is full of signs that prove the existence of God. So, for example, we say that just as we search for food when we're hungry and we search for water when we're thirsty, we need to recognize God for our spiritual well-being, so we search for him. There's this natural inclination within every human being to search for God. And whenever somebody faces extreme hardship and there's absolutely no one else to turn to, a person automatically turns to God. So when all the world's material forces cannot help, he calls Allah for help. And in his nature, he knows that God exists. And there's verses of Quran that point to this. For example, chapter 29, verse 65, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا رَكِبُوا فِي الْفُلْكِ دَعَوَا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ فَلَمَّا نَجَّاهُمْ إِلَى الْبَرِّ إِذَا هُمْ يُشْرِكُونَ. Whenever they embark on ships and are faced with storms and dangers, they call on Allah with sincerity. And then when they safely turn to land, they go and they start worshipping other beings again. Once a person asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam to guide him towards Allah, saying that he was confused by the words of the atheists and polemicists. And Imam alayhi salam asked him, have you ever traveled by ship? He said, yes. He said, did it ever happen that the ship sprang a leak? There was no one to save you from drowning in those great waves of the ocean. He said, yes. The Imam said, at that dangerous moment, and in that state of despair, did you have the feeling that an infinite and almighty power might save you from your terrible fate? And the man said, yes, that's the way it was. So he said, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is the source of reliance and towards whom mankind looks with hope when all of the doors are closed. And the Quran recounts the story of Fir'aun in Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verse 90. Allah says, وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ. And when the Fir'aun realized that he was drowning, so this says, and we gave the Bani Israel safe passage across the sea, فَأَتْبَعَهُمْ فِرْعَوْنُ وَجُنُودُهُ بَغْيًا وَعَدْوًا. And then Fir'aun followed them, going after them, حَتَّى إِذَا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرَقِ, until Fir'aun realized that he was drowning. قال, then he said, آمنت, I believe, أنه لا إله إلا الذي آمنت به بنو إسرائيل وأنا من المسلمين. He said, I believe in him who there is no God but the God that the Bani Israel believe in. But at that point it was too late. So in that last moment, the real belief and all other delusions and illusions are taken away. It becomes clear to us who the real Lord is. And God's existence is so obvious that it doesn't have to be questioned. The Quran says, قَالَتْ رُسُلُهُمْ أَفِي اللَّهِ شَكٌّ فَاطِرِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Their messenger said, chapter 14, Surah Ibrahim, chapter 14, verse 10. The messenger said, what about Allah? Is there any doubt? The originator of the heavens and the earth. So in one of our humanities classes when we were in college, part of it was that we had to give a public speech. So I gave a 5-minute speech about a religious topic. The topic I don't remember, but I remember the Q&A that happened afterwards because we had a Q&A with the students. The first student comment was that I was speaking about matters of faith that could not be proven. So I asked this lady some very simple questions. This was all spontaneous, so it was pretty cool how it came about. So I asked her, have you ever read about or studied Egyptian civilization? She said yes. So I said, where did the Great Pyramids come from? She said, well, the Egyptians built them. And I said, how do you know that they built them? And she said, did you ever see the blueprints for the pyramids? Did you ever see the Egyptians building them? Did you see them and talk to them about how they built them? How do you know that the Egyptians of that time built the pyramids? And she said, well, because of the artifacts and the signs that they left behind that we have found. So I said, okay, so the artifacts are signs of the existence of the ancient Egyptians that you never saw yourself. She said, yes. I said, but how do you know that it was the Egyptians that built the pyramids? How do you know that the pyramids didn't just pop up out of the ground? How do you know that somebody must have built them? And she said, well, because of the shape and the way that they're made, it looks like somebody built them, and there's the design. Of course, the human mind automatically believes in God, but we're steered away from it for whatever different reasons. And it's just directed in the wrong way. But it's all naturally there to recognize these things. So she said this. So I said, so you're saying that because they have design, organization, and a function, that they must have been built by somebody? And she said, yes. So I said, tell me, what have humans in the thousands of years of our advancement, what have we made that is more advanced, more organized, and has better function than just one cell of your body? And the answer is, nothing. So if those are the things that human beings create, if they're the result of intelligence, how can this tiny thing called a cell, which is more advanced than anything humans have come up with, not be the result of intelligence? So this is the kind of result that we're supposed to come to, a conclusion that we naturally make, but we sometimes delude ourselves. Next we have the instinct to worship. All human beings have instinct, and every single one of our instincts has a real end to them. So just as these instincts are necessary and real, the instinct to worship God is also a part of a person's nature. So somebody who's hungry seeks food. And we don't say that food is an illusion. So yeah, you might have the desire to be hungry, but that food you're looking for is an illusion. Or that you're thirsty, but the water you're looking for is an illusion. It's not real. So we have this desire to worship in the same way that the hunger points to the reality of food. The thirst points to the reality of water. This desire to worship points to the reality of God. This is natural. This is very easy for any open-minded person to realize. Next we have one of the objections to the belief in God that people bring up. They say, well, you say that God created the universe, but it's just as likely that the universe always existed. They say that the universe itself is eternal. So they say, why does there have to be a creator for the universe? Maybe the universe always existed and it will always exist. So those who pose this question, they hold some self-evident truths. They believe in some self-evident beliefs that will disprove their claim. So they say that the universe was formed at the Big Bang. So if the universe was created at the Big Bang, then obviously it's not eternal. So it had a beginning. Then there's no explanation as to how things like time, space, gravity, the laws of nature, how these came to be. And nothing in the universe is ever permanent. Everything is constantly going through change, which means it cannot maintain itself. Everything dies and decays. Therefore, there must be an external source for its existence and for its maintenance. And the universe is on its way towards, as any system, we learn in science that every system tends towards equilibrium. If you have two containers of a liquid and you put a little pipe between them, if one has this much liquid, one has this much, and you put a pipe here, well, it's going to even out. Or if one is hot, one is cold, the temperature will come to equilibrium when you combine the two of them together in this way. So the universe itself is tending towards equilibrium. And they say that eventually the heat in the universe will disperse evenly throughout the entire universe. This makes sense, doesn't it? Some parts of the universe are hot, some are cold. That over the millions or the billions or the trillions of years, or however long the universe may exist, eventually it's going to reach an equilibrium throughout. That there'll be one temperature throughout the whole universe. All motion will stop, and because like a candle, basically the fuel of the universe will have run out. And that this will happen in a finite amount of time, in a fixed amount of time. Eventually it's going to reach this. So, if the universe did not have a beginning, if the universe had always existed, it would mean that the universe has already had enough time to reach equilibrium. If the universe did not have a beginning, we should be at equilibrium right now. Because if you go in the past and it always existed, that means it had an infinite amount of time to reach equilibrium, which takes a finite amount of time, so we should be at equilibrium now. The fact that we are not at equilibrium right now means that the universe had a beginning, it did not always exist, it did not create itself. So, our next point. People say, if everything has a creator, then who created God? Right? Everything has a creator, God created stuff, who created God? So they say if everything is in a chain of cause and effect, then who caused God? If God was not created, then that would invalidate cause and effect. So, piggybacking off what we said earlier, that something that is an effect, it was caused by something else. Something that was brought into existence did not bring itself into existence, it was brought into existence by something else. Something created did not create itself, it was created by something else. So it exists because it was caused by something else. So that cause is actually an effect itself. In essence, it doesn't have its own existence, it does not have the power to create because something else brought it. So, all causes are effects and none brought themselves into existence. So if the universe were all that exists and the chain of cause and effect are infinite, then there would be nothing with the power to create existence. And in such a scenario, nothing would exist. The only explanation that makes sense in this situation is for there to be a source of existence that is uncreated. A necessary existence, a prime cause, and this is the only rational, logical explanation. So there must be a source that brought things into existence, but was not brought into existence itself. As Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj Balagha, he says, Allah exists, but not from non-existence. He is the necessary being, He is always there. Next is what we already mentioned earlier, but it's good to repeat it again, is what we can call the book of natural laws. That the universe exists according to a set design, therefore it must have a designer. And nothing in the universe ever steps away or deviates from these laws. So when we call something a law, we say there's natural laws out there. A law is intended to control something to achieve a desired purpose. So laws are the product of intelligence. So as we said earlier, an archaeologist digs a site, uncovers an ancient set of laws. What does that archaeologist rationally and logically and intelligently conclude from that? That there was an intelligent person who wrote those set of laws in order to control a set population, in order to have some type of order. It wasn't an accidental or a random occurrence. Natural laws also have an author. The scientists do not write the laws, they discover them and they copy them down into science books. And the real author is the creator of the universe, and this author has the intelligence to write the laws, has a creative ability to bring the universe into existence, and then has the power to control everything according to those laws. Our next point is what we can call progressive levels of complexity. We say the greater levels of complexity mean a greater level of design. So if we were to imagine a number of bricks that we have, it would take one level of intelligence to take these bricks and just put them in a straight line. We could say that's one level of intelligence. it'll take a little bit more intelligence to take these bricks and arrange them in a square. And it would take another higher level of intelligence to take these bricks and form a building or a cube out of them. So every single one of these levels of complexity requires a greater design, requires more intelligence. So therefore, greater design demands greater intelligence. And now let's compare these things. We say that the cube of bricks requires intelligence, correct? Making a building requires intelligence. What about bringing into existence the matter that makes up the dirt? What about the natural laws that govern the way that everything is created? So putting bricks in a square or in a line requires intelligence, but creating the bricks and the laws that govern all of this does not require intelligence. This is an illogical comparison. This is a biased type of thinking. If we were unbiased, we would say that not only do all of these require intelligence, but the actual creating of the brick, its matter, bringing it into existence and writing the natural laws for the universe, which is of an infinite level of complexity, this requires an infinite level of intelligence and power. Next we have an example of what we can call the book of morality. Just like we have a book of natural laws that is a standard for us to follow physically, there is a standard of morals that already exists out there. So whether I believe in the scientific natural laws or not, they're true and they exist. And whether I believe in the moral laws or not, they're true and they exist as well. So the physical things are determined by natural laws, but what we call our free will, our ability to choose and make decisions, is not constrained, is not determined by natural laws. Therefore, the source of our free will must be something supernatural. And maybe not tomorrow, but Saturday we'll discuss free will in a little bit more detail. So what we call morality is the system of what we consider right and wrong. It determines what we ought to do or what we ought not to do, what we should do, what we should not do. This is morality. If morality actually exists, it must be independent of human beings. Just like the natural laws are independent of human beings. If they're not independent from us, then they don't really have any meaning. They're useless. We do not create the natural laws based on our own wishes, but it already exists out there. For example, just like the laws of mathematics are beyond us. I can't say 2 + 2 = 5. Like I work, 2 hours at $2 an hour. You have to give me $5 now because that works out better for me. I can't change the laws of mathematics. Therefore, I can't change the laws of morality like that. The laws of nature exist. We have no choice but to obey them. And the laws of morality already also exist, with the difference that here God gives us free will whether or not to follow them. And morality would have no meaning. It only has meaning when it's objective in this way. So a subjective morality only has value to the person who imagines it or brings it into existence from his own bias. Because there's no reason, if I make a law of morality, no reason for you to follow it or you to follow it because it's based on my bias. But if it exists out there, independent of us, now we have to conform ourselves to it. So only an objective morality dictated by a supernatural author can have a valid authority over all of mankind. And we call the author of natural and moral laws God. We all naturally believe that there's certain things we should and shouldn't do. So we already believe that there is an objective set of laws out there, but who is the author of those laws? If it's not us, it has to be God. So, just to quickly summarize, in talking about the existence of God, there's a proof from cause and effect, which demonstrates that there must be a first cause. The design of the universe shows that there is a being out there with intelligence. The operation of the universe shows the power of this being. The perfect operation of the universe shows the justice of this being. The universe goes through change and decay, which shows that it cannot create or maintain itself. From all of the data that we gathered from the universe, showing that every single speck of dust in the universe shows design and power, it shows to us that the existence of God is the greatest of scientific truths. The natural instinct to believe in God points to the reality of God, just as all of our other natural instincts point to realities. In times of hardship, we cry out to God. Everything in the universe is a sign that points to God. We showed that the universe cannot be eternal in itself, and it had a creator. We showed that God is uncreated because if he was not uncreated, nothing could exist. We showed that there is a book of morality out there written by God, just as there is a book of natural laws that we don't write, but that we just discover. The only difference is the book of science, the book of natural laws, we discover it, but the book of morality is revealed to us. And that we believe in morality as a self-evident truth, which in itself shows that there is an author out there in God who has written this for us, and that greater complexity requires greater design. And just as we attribute intelligence to the low levels and elementary levels of design, we also have to attribute intelligence to the creation of that infinitely complex design of the universe. So to finish off today's session, we're going to review a debate that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam had with an atheist. His follower and one of his great students, Mufaddal, wrote him a letter asking Imam Sadiq alayhi salam to assist him and help him in refuting some atheists that he was debating with. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam wrote him a detailed account of a debate that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam himself had with an atheist. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam writes to Mufaddal and said that this man, this atheist said, and of course you're going to see through this, that all of these objections to the belief in God, they existed then, and the Imam alayhi salam, how beautifully and eloquently everything we've been talking about, he condenses it so well. So this person said, the atheist said, this universe has existed for eternity before and will still exist for eternity. One tree grows and another withers. One is born while another dies. And the link that binds them together existed in the past and will exist in the future. Your claim to the divine knowledge is a baseless one, founded on no such actual proof as to justify the existence of God. It can only be called a belief inherited from your forefathers and traditions. The existence of various things of the universe, whether real or not, could only be determined through the medium of the five senses. Eyes with which we see, ears by which we hear, nose by which we smell, hands and feet with which we touch and feel. Now, I have never known God through any of the above mentioned senses and cannot therefore believe in him, but I request that you will let me hear those arguments with which you convince other people. So he clearly lays out the materialistic argument. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Now we also have to not only learn the proofs that he uses, but also the etiquette and the method that he uses. He doesn't badger him. He doesn't try to force him to believe. He uses a progressive form of debating where he tries to form a foundation with him. If one proof doesn't work, he moves on to another. And he moves from one to another, to another, to another, until we'll see how this ends up. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, I prove God's existence by the inherent instinct of his being, which each man, whether as an affirmed atheist or not, has in him. So the natural belief that everybody has. The atheist says, how can you say so? The mind cannot know the existence of anything through any medium but that of the five senses. Have you seen Allah, heard his voice, smelled him, tasted him with your tongue, or touched him with your hands or feet? How could one realize him? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, then your denial of God is because you have not felt him with the senses given to us for knowing objects. I too have not felt him with either of them. So of course he admits, yes, God is not physical, so you can't know him physically. He says, but my belief is as strong as your disbelief. Both cannot be right. Do you admit this? The man says, most certainly, either you're wrong or I'm wrong. So the first argument Imam Sadiq alayhi salam uses for him, or the second actually after that of natural belief, but the first other than natural belief, is making the safer of two choices. He puts to him, right, a probability. Exactly. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, very well, if you're right, there's no danger for me and threatening you with Allah's displeasure for your disbelief. Right? He says, if you're right, and there's no God, then there's no danger for me threatening you with disbelief. The guy says, right, there shall be no danger. And then Imam alayhi salam said, if I am right, do you not think that you will suffer the punishment for your disbelief and I shall receive a reward for being away from your opinions? The atheist said, quite possibly. Then the Imam said, will you tell me which of us is the wiser, granting the possibility of both the situations? The atheist said, oh, your belief is a presumption, a groundless assertion, while mine is a truth based upon common sense. I do not perceive him by my senses, therefore he does not exist. Okay, so he evades the question. But the Imam says, okay. Next argument. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said to him, when your senses could not perceive God, you disbelieved him, but I, on the contrary, believed in him, because my senses failed to experience him. The very theory that made you disbelieve compelled me to believe in him. You see, he's showing the man that yes, we believe in the same evidence, but the conclusion we're drawing is different. You see, we say in Islam that God cannot be created, that whatever can be known by the senses cannot be Allah. Whatever is created cannot be God. So the atheist says, how is this possible? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, because things are compound, murakkab, they're made of parts, one on top of another. Every compound thing possesses shape and color that attracts the senses. Therefore, that which is felt or known by the senses having shape and color cannot be God. Your argument for disbelief is foolish because God cannot be like any of the things perceived by the senses, nor can he be said to bear any resemblance to anything which has to undergo an ordeal of change and decay. For everything is under the one and the same law, the law of transformation and decline, entropy, right? Allah, our Creator, cannot be perceived by the five senses you mentioned, for he is not a thing that is compound or created. If he was visible to the eye, perceivable to the senses, he would have resembled the things that are visible and perceivable to the senses on account of their being compound and created, and in that case, he would no longer have remained a creator. So, whatever is created has limits, goes through change, means number one, it's not infinite, it's not absolute. It has needs because it goes from one change to another, that it cannot fulfill itself, therefore it can't be the creator. Atheist says, what nonsense you talk. No, I cannot believe unless I perceive by any of these five senses. Sadiq alayhi salam says, okay. Imam alayhi salam, he says to him, I challenge you then, I accuse you then for the very defect you accused me of. Your claim is without reason and proofs as well. Your arguments are also on the same lines as you thought mine were, and for which you had such an aversion. So the atheist says, how can I be held liable for the same defect that your argument has? So the Imam says, in the beginning, you falsely accused me with this, that my claim to the knowledge of God was purely traditional and had no actual basis or evidence for the fact. That accusation now applies to you, because you persist in the theory that a thing not known through the medium of the senses is not existent, though strong evidence proves it otherwise. You disregard the arguments and all messages from God through the prophets and the favored ones of God. Then he says, tell me, have you visited every corner of the world? Remember we're talking about the limits of science, how an experiment is very... So he said, of course the Imam knows all this. He says, have you visited every corner of the world? The atheist says, of course not. The Imam says, have you ever ascended to or visited the sky which you behold with your eyes, or been in the depths of the earth? Have you traveled the world, dived in every sea, and moved to the atmosphere to presumptuously deny the existence of an omniscient, omnipotent creator? You must have been to all of these places, right? To deny God, you must have been to all these places. He says, no, you know I've never been there. Like, it's impossible for me. The Imam says, well, how can you say that he is not in those places where neither you nor your senses have ever been? Maybe he's living there, right? The atheist says, I can't be certain. Maybe a person of extraordinary intelligence may live in one of those places. So the Imam says, as you have admitted the probability of a creator, you will, I hope, be convinced to admit the certainty of a creator. So from flat denial, you have now come to doubt. From doubt, maybe you'll go to faith. So the atheist says, this doubt is the result of the question you put about the places that my senses have not seen, but I am at a loss to understand how a thing can be said to exist unless felt by them. So now he's starting to realize a little bit. The Imam says, well, I explain this and bring you to a belief through the medium of this halila. The Arabic word is halila, what was the Arabic, the English word, myrobalan fruit. It's a fruit. Well, this was an Indian medic atheist that he was having a discussion with, who was a person of medicine. He used this fruit for medicine. The atheist says, go ahead and try. This halila will be very suitable for it. It is one of the fruits of medical science in which I am well versed. Okay, great. Imam alayhi salam, he says, everything compound is created. Creation shows a creator. He says, do you see this fruit? He says, yes, I do. He says, can you see what's inside it? He says, no. The Imam says, then there must not be a pit inside this one, because you don't see it with your eyes. Correct? So the Imam wanted to show the man that you can believe in things even without seeing them. Obviously, you have this fruit in front of you, you will conclude that it has a pit, it has a seed. But the Imam is telling him, well, you don't see the seed, so won't you say that there's no pit or seed inside it? So the atheist says, how can I say that? Maybe there isn't one. So the Imam says, there's neither a kernel hidden under the shell, and there's no color inside it. And the guy says, I know nothing. Both may be absent. What he's doing, he's being stubborn. He's denying what his reasoning concludes supernaturally in order to stick to his original claim that you can't know anything except through the senses. So when the man continued to be stubborn, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam then asked about what he thought this fruit to be, whether it's a product of a tree or did it come about by itself. And the man says, I'm not foolish to say that it came to existence by itself. It's obviously the product of a tree. The Imam said, then you admit the existence of a tree which you have not seen. He says, yes, but add to that, the fruit tree, like all other things, has self-existed for all eternity. Can you refute this belief of mine? He's saying the tree always exists. He said, yes. The Imam says, did you see the fruit before it came into existence? He says, no, how could I? The Imam says, then perhaps when you saw the trees first, it didn't have the fruit on it. But next time you saw it, it did. Will you therefore believe that the fruits came into existence from the state of non-existence? And he said, why not? But I say, what went to make the fruit was already in the tree, which in due course of time got united and formed the fruit, which is reasonable, right? In his own way of thinking. The Imam said, had you seen the seed from which the fruit sprang up? He said, yes, I have. The Imam said, does it sound perfectly consistent to you to say that the roots, the branches, the barks, the leaves, and all the fruits which combined together and weighed many tons were lying concealed in that small seed? The guy says, no, I cannot understand how all these things could be concealed in one seed. Imam alayhi salam says, will you admit that they could not be present in the seed, but they came into existence afterwards? And the atheist said, yes, but I do not say that they were created by someone and you can't prove it to me. He says, why not? He says, if I show you a design or if I show you a painting, you'll have to believe that it was made by someone. And the atheist says, yes. He says, okay, does it not strike you that this fruit is made upon a fixed design? And then he goes, Imam alayhi salam, he started describing some of the characteristics of the fruit in order to explain how it's based on a design. And then the man says, would it not have been better to cover the seed with leaves? And later on we're going to get into this, how atheists and materialists, what they do is they have this argument where instead of refuting the existence of God or showing that there's no design, what they try to do is they try to criticize nature. They try to criticize the design to retroactively say, well, since the design is bad, then there's no design. Since there's no design, there's no creator. But this is irrational. We're going to show later on why. So this is what the guy tries to do. He says, would it not have been better to cover the seed with leaves? Sadiq alayhi salam says, no, Allah is the best judge. And he starts to explain to the guy why it will be a bad idea, and he spoke about the design of the seed. So showing the guy why what he considers a better design is actually a worse design. Then the man said, you prove to me beyond all doubts the existence of someone who has created these things, but why make it a distinct creator? Why not say these things have created themselves on their own? And then Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, because the design points to an intelligence, doesn't it? The man said, yes, it's obvious. The Imam said, then do you think it's consistent to say that intelligence and wisdom came into existence from non-existence? And the man says, no. The Imam said, do you know that this fruit did not exist before but came into existence afterwards, and that it also decays and returns to non-existence? He says, yes, I know this. The Imam said, when you declare the fruit to be created, it follows that you do not think it to be its own creator. So the man says, do you have any other proofs, or this is it? So the Imam says, tell me why this fruit, which you say to have created itself, cannot save itself from being plucked, squeezed, and eaten. And the man says, because it only has the power to create itself, not to do the other stuff. So the Imam says, okay. This is one of the other things that is very important in discussion with people, that if somebody says something that's irrational, one of the ways you can show them it's irrational is to take it to its logical conclusion. Because if it's rational, if it's logical, it should follow through all the way and be true all the way. So the Imam says, okay, tell me as to when this fruit created itself. Whether it did it before it came into existence or afterwards. If you say afterwards, your assertion is absurd, because it's impossible for a thing to create its own self when it has already existed. So if I exist right now, how can I create myself when I already exist? It's nonsense. He continues, if you say that it created itself before it came into existence, it is also nonsense. How is it possible for something that does not exist to create another thing? If it doesn't exist, it means it's not there. It can't do anything. So as you be the judge and tell me which theory is absurd and irrational. And the man says, yours is correct. And then Imam says, alayhi salam says, then why don't you accept it? The man says, I do accept. I'm quite clear about the truth and veracity of the fact that the things, including the fruit, are neither created by themselves, nor depend on themselves for their growth and functioning. But a doubt comes into my mind that the tree may perhaps be the creator of the fruit, because the fruit is a product of the tree. And Imam alayhi salam, he says, well, who made the tree? And the guy says, well, another fruit. So the Imam says, this is all the same. Meaning that you're repeating the same thing over and over. And what we talked about earlier about the infinite chain of cause and effect, this is what he's pointing to now. He says, this is all the same thing, but fix a limit for it. Otherwise, our arguments must go round and round in a circle, having no goal or end. So, of course, he's telling us that the cause and effect, this chain, cannot regress to infinity, or nothing would exist. So he says, the Imam alayhi salam says, if you want to come to any conclusion, then believe the Creator to be God and terminate the chain of arguments. Meaning, come to something real. Why don't you believe that it is God the Almighty? Surely you can have no more doubts lingering in your mind. The Imam said, I have some. You have not yet given me convincing proofs of His existence. Okay? Very patient, right? Imam alayhi salam, he says, the senses cannot know anything except through the medium of the mind. So he's explaining to him, just like we're showing, reasoning is above sensory experience. And that's what he's showing him. The Imam says, the senses cannot know anything except through the mind's medium. The mind is the true guide. Your assertion is quite the opposite of this. You say that the mind has no power whatsoever to know anything without the intervening of the senses. And the man said, yes, your argument is quite fresh, meaning I've never heard of this before. But before I admit to it, give me some more details. The Imam said, okay. You must know that one sense, or even if all of the senses become useless, the ears become deaf, the eyes become blind, the smelling power vanishes, the mind alone regulates the respective functions of the senses. The mind only guides one to perform a particular thing or to avoid it, and things done by its suggestion bring about a very wholesome result. Do you know that the mind survives the death of the senses? The man said, yes, but its feeling and knowledge of things vanish with the senses. For instance, ears can hear, but not the mind. It is deaf without ears. Okay, now we test this theory logically. The guy says you can't hear without the ears. The wisdom of the Imam alayhi salam, he says, do you know that when a mother gives birth to a child, that child's senses have no power to act? The senses are quite unfit to perform any function at that period of life. And the man said, yes. And the Imam says, tell me then, which of the senses suggested the child to cry for milk and to be cheerful and jolly when it drank the milk? And then he continued to give examples of instinctive behavior that have nothing to do with the senses, meaning the knowledge that the child has is not given to the child by its interaction with its environment. It's already in it, within it. So the man said, I know this, that the mind can only know things through the senses. So he's being a little stubborn and sticking to it. Imam alayhi salam, he says, the senses can in no way know the existence of invisible things such as God and the soul. It is for this reason that the Creator gifts us with a mind and establishes His proof of His existence through its medium. He has created the senses that they may observe external conditions and argue in favor of Him. And then He gave examples of great natural events that our senses can detect and which will be proof of the existence of God through our reasoning. He continues, thus putting everything to severe test and scrutiny, the mind reasons and concludes that there must be someone who has created this most wonderful universe. It was the mind that said that there was someone who controlled all these things. When the senses conveyed their impressions to the mind sensibly thought that the wind did not blow of its own accord, of its own decision. If it thought, the mind thought, that if the wind blew on its own decision, it will blow on continuously and it would never pause, because it is proved in signs of natural philosophy that a natural force does not stop unless resisted by some stronger force. You know, the law of inertia, something will continue forever unless stopped by another force. Again, it would not have demolished one thing and left another unmolested. So Imam is giving him examples that if the forces of nature were not controlled in a perfect way, they would have destroyed everything. Then Imam alayhi salam, he continues and asks him a question. He says, have you ever dreamed that you're laughing or crying bitterly? Or traveling in known or unknown countries and recognizing the countries that you had seen or known? The man said, yes, I have had many dreams like this. Imam alayhi salam said, have you ever seen in your dreams relatives, parents, brothers that died long ago and identified them as you did while they were alive? The man said, why not? I've experienced many such dreams. The Imam said, well then, which of your senses felt the dead man and pointed him out to the mind that it could recognize him and speak with him? Which of your senses tasted the food in your dream, recognized the countries, known or unknown, through which it traveled? Which sense cried and left? The man said, I'm confounded. I can't reply which of my sense in my sleep did these things. In fact, when one is asleep, he's like a dead person. In that condition, it's impossible for the senses to feel, know, see, or hear anything. Imam said, then tell me, when you were startled and you woke up from your sleep, did you not remember your dream sufficiently to narrate to your relations and friends what happened in the dream, forgetting nothing? The man said, yes. And he said, all right, which of the senses gave you the memory of what you saw when those senses were asleep? And he said, none of the senses seem to have any hand in these. The Imam said, can you not see now that it is the mind that sees all things? Remembering in the dreaming state when all the senses have stopped working, don't you know that the mind has been blessed with reason by means of which God establishes His proof? And the man now, he wants to try to rationalize his own belief. So he says, well, what I saw in the dream is unsubstantial, it's invalid, it's like a mirage, which from a distance appears to be real water, but on approach is discovered to be only sand. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, how can you make this comparison when in your dream you actually experience different tastes? The man said, because when I approached the mirage, I discovered only sand, and when I woke up, I discovered nothing of what I had seen in the dream. So the Imam explained to him the difference between a mirage and what you experience in your dreams. When you get to the mirage, there's nothing to experience. But in your dreams, you taste and you touch and you see and you hear and you smell. You experience all of these things without the physical senses of when you're awake. The man said that the dreamer sees the same things that his senses in a state of wakefulness have witnessed. So what he's trying to say is that, well, I experienced those things when I was awake, and then I repeated those experiences in my dream. The Imam says, it's foolish to admit the knowledge of the mind when the senses are sleeping and then deny it when the senses are awake. He says, a man of reason must believe that the mind is the king. God has created the mind to be the master of the body. And despite the loss or derangement of the senses, the mind remains intact. But if the mind goes out of order, the senses also go out of order. The eyes don't see, the ears don't hear, and so on. So he's showing the mind is what we have to rely on. So the man, he says, I hardly believe that you'd be able to deal with these difficult questions without being confounded, your arguments so elegant as to appear irrefutable. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, listen, I'll give you some more proofs. He says, when you think of any calling or devise plans to build something, do you not deliver the order to that effect? So, you think of an idea in your mind, a design. So the man said, yes. The Imam said, when you're devising such plans and forming designs of non-existing things, do you make any of your senses the partner of the mind that creates them? He says, no. He says, please go on with your arguments. The Imam says, certainly. Then Imam Sadiq alayhi salam gave him many detailed examples from nature of the wonderful design of the universe to prove the existence of God. So he's showing him that the mind can create knowledge all on its own without the senses doing anything. So then he explained that the perfect relation of every part of the universe with the other parts shows that there must be a creator. And then he explained monotheism to him. If there had been more creators, there'd be contradictions in design, contradictions in power, contradictions in worship. And as the verse of the Quran said, there'd be chaos between them. So the man then said, finally admitting, you have by your eloquence made me unhesitatingly declare that the creator of all things is one and the same. He's the only one wise, merciful, omnipotent, omniscient God. And then he goes on praising Allah and finally accepting the existence of God. So all of these things are pretty clear, and we said they're simple and understandable unless we make them confusing ourselves. It is so obvious that the Quran says that there should be absolutely no doubt. If we did not confuse ourselves with external falsehoods, then every single human being without any doubt would automatically believe in God, because it's the natural state of a man. Just like we look for food and water, we would automatically look for God. So tomorrow, inshallah, we are going to continue our discussion, and we're going to start talking about atheism, and we have a list of about 20 or 30 objections that the materialists and the atheists bring against the belief in God, and we'll try to cover those as much as possible. And if you have any questions, please make sure to write them down, so tomorrow we have a nice question answer session as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.